Good. Well, welcome everybody. First of all, I'd just like to thank our panelists for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about the financial services and sort of best practices in there. And as you can see, we've got Derek, James, and Christopher joining us, who have all had extensive careers within the financial sector. They're going to talk a bit about their sort of military career, their transition, and how they got into it. So before we get started, I'd just like to talk a little bit about Ex-Military Careers. And Ex-Military Careers is a non-for-profit organisation that helps the military community within the UK and within the US. This includes the service leavers, military spouses and partners, and also reservists and National Guard. Our aim is obviously to support the community to achieve successful transition from the forces into a civilian career. And part of the service is our free-to-use jobs board and job search platform, unique to us. In addition, we provide tailored career advice and insight published on our website, shared across large and growing online community. Harry, I'd like to hand over to you now.
Craig, for that. And yeah, welcome everyone. Obviously, firstly, thanks to all our speakers, all the effort that's sort of gone into this to get this set up. This is the first sort of EMC and Broadgate Search kind of combined event, and the first EMC event over in the US. So obviously, it's a real exciting sort of piece for us, and the guys on here are going to share their sort of wisdom, knowledge, wealth of experience from back in their military days through right financial services, and essentially just to echo the kind of message that we're trying to do at EMC is make that transition period for anyone in the military, from any walk of life, any background, when they're transitioning out of active service into civilian life, just trying to make that transition as hard as possible. EMC actually was brought about by our own founder of the Chernobyl Group, him coming back from active tour of duty in the early 2000s, struggling to sort of get into that work there, and that's where EMC came about. So for anyone watching, either sort of later on or on live right now, if you'd like to get involved at any point in time, either as a mentor, speaker on our next event, you'd like to sort of work with any of the people making that transition, then please do reach out. I'll include all sort of contact details on the video later on. And yeah, we'll make it happen. So without further ado, I'm going to get cracking. And for those of you that can't see, so this is actually obviously live on LinkedIn right now. We're posting on our social media channels and YouTube. And we are running a poll. For those of you that be watching it not live, can't see the poll here. So to start things off, I'd just like to ask our audience, which US state has the highest number of veterans within the financial services industry? Is it A, Florida, B, Texas, C, New York, or D, any others across the United States? I'd be keen to sort of know the lie of the land and where everyone is. So thank you for that, guys. And then moving on, we will pick the brains of our panelists. So obviously to start off with, I will do a complete disservice if I try and introduce each gentleman in front of me, because like I said, they have extensive careers in the military, financial services as well. So what I'd like to do, gentlemen, first of all, is just introduce yourselves, a bit about your sort of background in the military, what it is you're up to now, and then we'll sort of take things from there. So Chris, if you'd like to kick us off, we'll go to you first.
Sure, Harry, thanks. Pleasure to be here today and to talk to everybody. So my name is Chris Gerda. Start military-wise, I was 19, decided college really wasn't for me, and kicked myself into the infantry. So went for the adrenaline rush, right? Airborne and air assault and all that. I was with the 10th Mountain Division for 4 years, pre 9/11, and then just after 9/11 as well. So I served from 2000 to 2005. I did a tour of Kosovo and a tour of Iraq, 2003, 2004. And, I was kicking doors, night raids. That's kind of what you did at that period of time. And I really, as we get into it today, I think a lot of those skills really transition well to financial services. Although it doesn't seem to relate, you just kind of pick up things on leadership and the tips and adapting that kind of pushes you over the hump, which leads me to kind of where I'm at today. I currently work for a technology firm, financial processor. We do the lion's share of business-to-business payments in the United States. We're called Bottom Line Technologies, Paymode X. Our claim to fame is authenticating businesses before they're paid. So we break down business email account compromise fraud, different types of payment fraud, and that drives our efforts in the industry. And my job is to oversee that payment network and block the bad guys out. Prior to that, I worked in anti-money laundering, fraud, financial crimes for several major financial institutions leading up till then.
Excellent, thanks. It's interesting interesting sort of scope in the financial services. You never sort of stop blocking the bad guys out if you like going from that military background. So no, thank you for that. Derek, move on to you next if you'd like to say a few words, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. Happy to speak with everybody. I was in the Army as well, but even before I was in the Army, people asked me if I was in the Army. So with both grandfathers being in the military, in the Army, both my maternal grandfather working on the Manhattan Project, my paternal grandfather in the Battle of the Bulge, World War II, it just kind of flowed. So 9/11 happened, I was in law school, and lo and behold, I thought, well, maybe I should join the Army. So that's what I did. And I became a judge advocate. So I was a military attorney for 8 years, from 2005 until 2013. At which point, about 2012, I thought, I've been brutally spoiled with great assignments. I was in Iraq. I was at the War College with the chief counsel there. I was at Fort Bragg as a brigade judge advocate. And when looking at the 20-year career, and I can get into this in greater detail later on, I just did a skill set analysis and also how fun everything was. Being the Army, 100% fun. And it has to be, I think, in order for you to truly be able to get up every morning at the time you do and do what you do. So that remained 100% fun. Being a JAG was about 95% fun based upon the work. And long story short, ended up doing a lot of things over and over. And while it was 95% fun, I thought, let's see what is out there in the civilian world. So I then began planning a strategy, what would look like a career in the civilian world. And that's what led me to financial services. And I can go into greater detail on that. But at the end of the day, in 2013, I joined wealth management and eventually began working in hedge funds, where I spent the majority of my career as in-house counsel and a senior compliance officer. So admin law, regulatory law, all of the security exchange matters that one might think a company is a hedge fund, and Regulation Investment Advisors Act. So a lot of that, and then building on both. Now I'm in the process of actually launching my own firm. So happy to answer any questions about that offline, but it's been a long time coming, and with some support. Now we're in the moving towards a launch phase. So blending both my career in working in the military as well as in finance. So very excited to see where that goes and launch that in the very near future. So a lot going on. I love my career, so I think we'll be talking about that, as we go through this, and all the detail you have to pay attention to. So that's my background, a high-level overview, and I look forward to speaking to everybody further detail.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Derek. And onto yourself, finally then, James, if you'd like to talk us through your sort of experience and background.
Sure, thanks, Harry. James Ferguson, I'm a Vice President of Regulatory Compliance. I run a division for it's like a fintech, basically, much like Chris. I provide financial services technology to help fight the bad guys as well through fraud and money laundering. To banks, credit unions, and companies like Facebook and Google as well. But some pretty interesting stuff. But I got my start in the United States Air Force. I was enlisted as well, and had a really good time. Actually did remote airfield operations over 5 years into 2000, served in Kuwait and Bosnia, and had a first stint in Kosovo right when it started to kick off as well. But spent most of my time over in that area in Europe. I was based out of Charleston, South Carolina. But a great experience for me, helped pay for my college and my education. But more importantly, I think it laid the foundation. I wasn't a very good college student initially, and I kind of went, and it helped me organize myself, instill the foundation of what it takes to be successful out there in the real world. It was a different, market for jobs when I left the military and I finished college too. It was a little bit tougher, but found financial services, and it's been a great career for me. There's a lot of great companies out there, and I think if you're looking for something that has value in a mission for you personally, leaving the military, it's a great career field to really investigate and search. So be happy to talk through that today with my panelists, and looking forward to the conversation. So thank you. That's a little bit about me.
No, excellent. Thanks for that, James. And just to mention, guys, we've had our first comment on our panelists for Go Air Force. So And be interesting to see how our viewers here, where the battle of the forces is going to come through. So anyone watching, you like to shout out Air Force, Navy, military, please feel free to, and we'll certainly keep a tally on it and have a little bet at the end. But thanks for that, Jet. Samuel, go Army. There's 1-1 now. Anyone on the Navy watching? Would be quite interesting to see if we have them all in there, but I'm sure it will come through. But no, thank you for that, gentlemen. As I sort of said at the start, I do a massive disservice introducing you. But where we'll sort of go from now, and I guess the key sort of point whenever working with anyone at Ex-Military Careers that's come in active service at the moment, their real biggest concerns and fears are making that sort of transition over to civilian life. What life's going to look like outside of the army, how they're going to cope without the kind of structure, I guess, if you like, the military brings for you. So what I'd like to do is hand over to our panelists now, just to talk about how they sort of transitioned out, maybe sort of the latter months or latter years of their life within the military.
Yeah, so just jumping in really quick, I found that some of the transitions
during that time and how, as in, so your transition period from the military into civilian life.
Sorry, I cut out there for a second, but what I was starting to say was the transition was to actually engage in behavior that I felt would, remain consistent, such as going to the gym, going for runs, maintaining a set schedule, being very regimented in my mornings, and in general looking for a civilian role with what translates, how I can translate what I did in the military to a civilian space, because it's literally another world. And so in looking at what I enjoyed doing, I then just mapped it out to, okay, I've been an athlete my entire life. Now I've been an attorney, I worked in-house. What translates in the civilian world, in what branch, what field? And then you kind of just go through, you rank what might be most interesting, and then see how your skill sets translate into that particular field and what your potential, in that field could be. So I began planning about a year out. But immediately, like I would say, the first 6 months post-Army, it was all very much trying to map out, key leaders, using a lot of the language that I became familiar with in the Army, key leader engagements, knowing your terrain, knowing your networks, knowing, who the decision authority was, because in the civilian world, I think we're all aware, there are people who make decisions who don't necessarily always have the highest rank in the office. So you need to be aware of that and who your influencers are. So a lot of like the soft skills that I credit the Army with teaching, because when you're working in an environment where you have a rank on your shoulder, it's easier to figure out who you should be speaking to get an action moving forward. The civilian world is a bit more obtuse. So learning who's wearing the rank, I think, is part of your process. But planning, like I said in the very beginning, planning for me was part and parcel of the whole thing. Just looking at what was out there and trying to figure out how I could, engage with that particular field.
Oh, excellent. What's good is I saw a lot of nods there from Chris and James when that was all happening. So, Chris, if you'd like to sort of share your thoughts and experiences on that, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah, sure. So I kind of knew what I wanted to get into, right? I knew I wanted to stay in the fight. So I gravitated toward a criminal justice major, but I also knew, I'm overseas for all these years. What am I doing over there? Let's dig. So I had a poli-sci minor and I had a law minor, and that gave me the ability to learn about why I was there. And I really focused on homeland security, terrorism financing, the psychology of criminals, white collar type of ideas. And one of the things I found was that I was still locked in the mission when I was in college. I was going to school. I wasn't particularly a good high school student, but I went to college and I got 4.0s. And I was reading every page of the book. I was doing all of the things that were offered to me as far as extra credit or extracurriculars to learn and engage. And what that did was made me a great student. But as Derek brought up, right, I didn't have great soft skills. So I could get the score, but I couldn't. And I could present on a subject and lead from the front and do that. But when it comes to sitting within a group of people, I was still sitting, with that is a great way to put it, right? With a rank on my shoulder. And I had this kind of chip sitting there. And I remember a professor saying to me, she was like, you need to start putting yourself in another person's shoes, empathize, listen, right? And that was really important and good for her, because she called me right out, right? Like that was really important. And it wasn't until after I left college that I actually started putting that at the forefront of how I communicate, and starting to like get more humble about it, right? Be able to learn how to change and grow as a person and how to communicate more effectively was this huge part of my transition, because you're so used to that rank and structure. And what I would say advice wise is people will surprise you. Civilians will surprise you. And you'll have the ability coming out of the military to be an expert at training people and at bearing great loads on your shoulders, whether that be a physical or mental load. And if you can relate that to the people around you, you will actually rise up as a leader in your organization and be something to aspire to. But to do that effectively, you've got to like ease it out a little bit, like in your shoulders and your face and your jaw. You got to smile a little bit more, and you got to give people a chance. And, you know, being really transparent, that's not the easiest thing to do sometimes. You know, breathing and meditation became part of my daily life, and that was very helpful. So that transition period goes on for 10 years, you know, like you're always, I need to make sure I'm not going back to that core of what I am in the military, going back to it, but rather applying it to where I'm at right now. So that's probably my transition period, ever in flux.
It's never ending, isn't it? Just getting there. And yourself, James, how was sort of that time for you?
Yeah, I wish I had a really romantic story about it, but I don't. You know, I can't agree with the panelists more, especially Chris. For me, it was a little bit different. I got out of school, ended up with a master's in accountancy, and haven't used it except for when I'm, you know, doing budgets and other things. But I went into sales, revenue, basically, and that has always been my calling for a couple of reasons. There's a structure, there's a process, and quite frankly, it's a heartbeat of any organization. And I think that was where I gravitated to. I will say, to Chris's point, when I had my first sales management job, my team told me, like, you always look like you're angry. It's just like you always have this like dead focus on your face, and you're trying, and that's just the way I went to work. And it was based off the military of, you know, I had a great drill sergeant or tech sergeant. He goes, hey, you know, you make a mistake here, you're going to kill somebody. And it's not so dramatic in the civilian world a little bit, but you can make severe mistakes in people's careers. You can make severe mistakes for your business. But failure is a little bit more welcome, in my opinion. So I would say you have to be focused on what you want. And I think financial services or fintech or whatever side of the business you're going to go in offers so many different varieties of a mission. And I think that's kind of important to look at. But my advice would be to be very focused, because when I came out, the career field was it was hard to get a job. There was a lot of unemployment, especially for people leaving college, and going out there without really networking or having a real focus on what you want to do was critically important for me. And when somebody told me that, I kind of started focusing on that sales side and really honed in on that's what I wanted to do. And once you could articulate what you want to do, then it seemed like the job offers started to come, and through networking and friends and family, you kind of get your way into that. But here's my biggest advice. Once you get in, it's exactly that. You have an opportunity based on what you learn in the military and your skill set. I look at it this way. Military taught me how to work. College taught me how to think in a lot of different ways. And you have a leg up on some of your competition coming into an organization, because you already know what you need to do and how you need to go about your daily routine. And you have a wonderful opportunity to bring people underneath your wing and teach them. So my biggest advice in the civilian world is always, especially when you transition, take a deep breath, be transparent, don't be afraid to listen, learn, and have a lot of empathy and care. And I think if you can accomplish those things, you will bring a team together and really be able to move the needle for an organization. And people will want to go to work for you and with you every day, because in my business anyway, I can't get anything done. There is no rank. And I want to make that very important. While people have titles and they can approve budgets and they have certain things they can do from a process standpoint, in my experience, the civilian world is all about team transparency and how you can work together. And you have to treat people like equals. And that's kind of what a lot of people want to feel, is they're on equal footing with you and they're respected and they want to learn and they want to be brought in with the thought process in the organization. And if you can do all those things, you have you'll have a big head start in your career. But just be focused and really know what you want. And if you don't, reach out to anybody here. I'm sure we'll be able to help talk you through it. And that's one big thing I love in my role today is coaching and teaching, and it's really rewarding in that regard. So hopefully that made sense, but that's my 2 cents.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Honestly, thank you for that, guys. And it's something that you all sort of touched on there about looking at sort of people with rank and moving away from that sort of what I said earlier, the structured sort of regimen of military life. We've actually had a question come through from LinkedIn from someone that's left the military just a year ago, and they said that they're finding it a struggle to be in the real world and sort of connect with people and really get out of that kind of mindset, if you like, of this is my sort of day at this time. This is what I need to do. So I just like to open it up to all of you guys really sort of experiences on that. Is how did you sort of deal with that just sudden sort of shift from this is what I had sort of laid out in front of me for the week, this is what I knew I had to do, to the sort of the chaos, the beautiful chaos of civilian life?
I would say that you need to welcome questions. You're going to get, I began my thought process on transitioning out about a year before I even had what in the US Army is called the DD-214. So I had decided, it was time to move on. And I then began defining my why. Like, I knew why I wanted to go to law school. I knew why I want to go to Fordham Law. I knew why I want to go to the JAG Corps, 9/11. Now I need to define why I want to be in the civilian world. And that helped me kind of manage my expectations when I was in the civilian world. And then I was like, okay, my why is I'm going to be a civilian attorney. At that point, didn't know exactly what. Eventually it was financial services for a lot of reasons I can get into. But the why was, now I'm going to be joining the civilian world. And you're going to encounter civilians, right? So you need to be open to having those conversations about your world. And so I kept my regimented approach. My gym time, as my wife knows, is sacrosanct. I will be doing that. I'll go for my runs. So certain things keep me grounded in my routine. But then you open up that latitude to engage the civilian world and have those conversations. So I would urge anyone who's thinking about, transitioning into the civilian world, as well as having made that transition and then making those connections. It's, basically you do need to smile a lot. That's part of the process. You want to be open to those conversations. And then on top of that, you also want to learn from other people in their civilian world. They may ask you why you're in the Army. And, for me, my initial thought is, I was like, I was about 2 miles away from where a major terrorist attack happened. So my why kind of filled in naturally, right? And then some people nowadays may not have that. And they want to ask you about why you're in the military, even if you're just wearing an Army t-shirt, they'll come up to you, or have an Army backpack and they'll want to start a conversation. You smile and you chat, and then lo and behold, you're connecting with people. So my defining my why to be in the civilian world included being open to having a lot of conversations with folks that would have no idea about what it was like to be in the Army, particularly as now we go on way post 9/11 and all of the activities in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere are fading from the front page of the newspaper. Having that simpatico and having that understanding, I found to be, very helpful in building connections, because I've been asked some zany questions. Zany questions. And as opposed to being like, turning to them and putting up my, using my command voice and being like, that's a stupid question. I would say, well, it's really interesting. Why do you think that? And then you talk about it, and then you have, lo and behold, an invitation to, meet more people or whatever. It just happened the other day by the waterfront here in Manhattan. So it's interesting, to say the very least, that transition point, particularly about a year out. I can definitely recall that, vividly. And, who knows the conversations you'll have. I would say a practical point, like I just said, you smile, you nod, and you chat. You have those conversations willingly and openly.
Oh, good stuff.
Are we going to go in order? I'm just curious.
No, just absolutely go for it, guys. Jump in on this one. It's an interesting. Obviously, myself not coming from that world, it's always something that whenever I speak to people, I ask about as well. So, any sort of thoughts on this one? Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're struggling, this is one of the things I would say, and you got to create your own structure. And I think COVID-19, I'm used to traveling and working in an office and bouncing from here to there. So this home and remote work every day, is somewhat a second challenge for me in a transition per se, because that's not my personality for the most part. But if you ever read How to Make Your Bed by Admiral McRaven, I think that's one of the biggest things in the world for me is you start off your day, just make your bed, you complete a task. And if you're trying to find structure, that's the first thing. Second thing, you gotta, create an agenda for yourself, and keep your healthy mind, healthy body. I think that's very important too. Find something that enriches your soul. But more importantly, don't be afraid to reach out, get involved with like some LinkedIn groups, ask a lot of questions, like Derek said, about how you can, maybe talk to somebody in a career field that you're looking for, or reach out to, if you're going to a university. One of the things I get involved with too is the veteran centers on campus. They have a wealth of information and support for you, and they're great. So if a few, I'll just make a shout out to, are University of Kentucky and Arizona State. They do a really great job for their students and their student body. I don't know. I always thought like regiment and creating clear lines. So I get up every day and I try to do the same thing I would, whether I'm going to work, traveling that day. You get up early, make your bed, do your workout, answer emails, eat breakfast, go about your day. And the more structure you can create for yourself, you realize that it becomes very easy and repeatable. And that helps at least create a lot of the get rid of the uncertainty of what your day is going to look like tomorrow. And it will help, believe it or not. And I think it helps with your mental state too, and how you go about those things. But that's what I do. And I think that's very important. And at least connecting virtually with groups and people is another key thing, because that'll keep your at least social agenda going on. Chris, I don't know if you have anything else you want to add to that. But just curious.
I think you guys covered it really well. I just saw one come into the chat. I know, Harry, you were going to probably call it out as a question. Background is 15 years in the Army and logistics. I want to get in financial services. What resources would you recommend, right? For qual, certification? How do I make myself more marketable? You're already marketable. That's my thought. You're already there, right? So in the military, we're taught to plan through every contingent scenario that could go wrong. Murphy's Law. And if you continue to plan Murphy's Law in your own life, right, you'll never jump to just going for it, right? You'll be planning. You can jump in the civilian world, right? We're not going into something that's so serious. We're not rating a building where we have to account for everything before we go in. Logistics is movement of items, movement of things. Financial services is the same thing, just money.
Yep.
And team leadership, even in the infantry, which has no applicability to financial services, but team leadership does, right? How do people move? How do you support somebody? How do you find where there's a hole in something? How do you call out, how do you do an after action review when something goes wrong, and then you reverse engineer it to make sure it doesn't happen again? You probably have every little piece of those puzzle, every piece of it already. You could probably walk into an interview with some sort of financial services operations and be highly qualified and find yourself with good, actionable answers to any question that they would have for you with that many years of experience. Don't let the word financial scare you away. It's all common sense. And I don't really do complicated math. Although being in financial services and working on Wall Street for a few years, people think I can do some wizardry math. Nah, man, no. You don't need that. Certainly, sure, on the hedge fund side, Derek could probably say some things. But as far as, I wouldn't be intimidated by it. It's really not that difficult.
Yeah, to build off what Chris was saying, as a practical point, write a resume for financial services, just spitball it. Literally put down pen to paper your skill sets for what you've done in the Army, and then hand it to a friend who's in the civilian world. Find a mentor or reach out to a service and ask for them to review, and then be able to translate the skills into civilian language. You'd be surprised how much that can bridge the gap in conversations before you even have to answer the first question.
No, absolutely.
Right. You want to think about like really good communication. You're like, do you have crisp communication skills? And be like, yes, I used to get on the radio and call for fire. So our communication skills are spot on, right? That it actually applies. Like, you can communicate, you know exactly how to do a very quick communication that you could apply to a business world really quickly, because a business leader wants to know what they need to know, exactly what they need to know, and they don't want a ton of wasted time.
Yeah,
we got that down.
Exactly. A portfolio manager might be interested to hear about being able to call for precision fires. I think that's great. But then you can also translate to saying, I have a bias for action. And there you go. You phrase it very crisp, succinct, and it's a sellable point. It's a marketing point for you, and an arrow in your quiver.
Yeah. To Chris's point too, just process oriented, just like you're saying, that's all huge benefit in this world for sure.
And I'm looking at Harry, and Harry looks like he's frozen.
Yeah.
He does, actually. There you go.
It's all right. I'm sure we can overcome this.
He just said great. You'll have a couple more questions at the networking session.
I mean,
I'll jump in and take over from Harry. Obviously, thanks very much for your insights and all that sort of good stuff. But what I'd like you guys to talk about now is the sort of steps that you took when you left the military to go into the financial services. So your sort of plan and everything out, your advice that you would give someone when they're doing it. So obviously, Chris, from your sort of security perspective, so the career path that you chose within the services, within the financial services. So Chris, if we can start with you, just speak about that transition and the best practices that you think, and basically what you did to get to where you are at the moment.
Yeah. So, I got out with a bachelor's degree out of college, and I ended up becoming a police officer, a federal police officer for a little while. But I knew I wanted to go into the financial crime space. So I just went online and I did some research, right? What are the financial crime programs out there that I was interested in when I was writing papers in my undergrad? And so I found a master's program in fraud and financial forensics that was kicking off at a university in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I signed up for it. And that got me the interview with a large bank, right, while I was in the program. So I knew I had a plan. I knew where I wanted to go. I knew that a master's degree was a really good way to become a leader in the compliance and security space. And I was able to actually learn more by taking that degree, right? I have a passion for learning, and so the books behind me, like, I do a lot of reading, and that's part of, I think, if I have a plan, anyone, just read books. Read a book a month. You will always find something in that book that is going to be applicable to whatever you're going through in your daily life, fiction or nonfiction. It helps even me out. It gives me ideas and creativity. And the reason that helps me as part of my plan to be good at catching money laundering or fraud is it makes me creative, and the bad guys are thinking outside the box all the time. And we have to think outside the box too, right? The cool part about coming from the military into the financial crime prevention space is from the military, we have the mindset of get the mission done. Sometimes we break rules or do risky things, and that carries over very well into the outside the box thinking that you need to catch a strange money laundering pattern, interrogate someone about why something is doing what they're doing. And we question things. We question the norm, and we're always looking, what's around the corner and what's coming up, because we're always looking for something suspicious from being in the military. And you transition that to financial crime, and it worked really well for me. So that's definitely it. And I think marrying your job with a passion too. I think Derek mentioned it at the beginning, right? I'm very passionate about this. It carries over into my work. I'd also caution, rein that in every once in a while. You don't want to be too passionate. You gotta be able to pull that back and be a little tactful. And always be open to new challenges. That's another piece of the plan, right? With financial crime, there's always going to be another challenge, and we're well suited and ready for that. And I think that's probably a pretty good place to kick it over to James or Derek.
Yep, I 100% agree with everything you said there. Books are amazing tools. There's several out there, but yeah, the passion thing was a big one for me. Before I found financial services, I did several different jobs out there. Bounced around the United States and came home to Charlotte, North Carolina, where I had my first job in financial services. But the one thing that really attracted me to it was the alignment of mission in a way. So the things that I was doing in the military, like we were, supporting the movement and obviously the Army, Navy, and everybody else over in Kuwait and Bosnia to catch bad people. Well, that's what I was doing. I was selling software and, to catch the same people and to make sure that we're not doing any business or having the ability to fund those people, stopping human trafficking or prevention of that, drug trafficking. Like, so if you watch Netflix and Narcos, everything around these things is what we're aimed at. And to me, that made sense. It created a purpose for me, and a bigger purpose that I haven't found since my days in the military. And I think that's the biggest point of why I love the career field so much. It's purpose, especially the side I'm on. We're trying to at least mitigate the movement of money for bad things happening, and making it harder for bad actors, so to speak. And even on the cusp of all this cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and blockchain, there's a ton of fascinating things that are going on. And we're trying to create new technology, and we're trying to give the tools to our financial system in order to mitigate risk with those and the adoption of those currencies and technology that's coming out there. So there's a lot of purpose in what we do every day. And I would just say that's kind of the one thing that spurred me on in this career field. And quite frankly, it's also the thirst of knowledge. You want to learn, this is the career field for you because it's constant. We go through an association called ACAMS a lot for internal certification, so we know what we're talking about. There's a lot of great things and the FBI comes and speaks at those conferences, so you really engage and you really feel like you're on the forefront of the mission, so to speak. But yeah, agree with everything Chris said there, but that's my 2 cents. If you really want to feel alignment in a purpose, that's the hardest thing to find in my personal experience in the civilian world, is the purpose outside of your family, of what you do every day. And this really aligned well for what I felt my mission and purpose was outside of, serving my country.
So for me, it was actually one, again, defining your why. So I knew I wanted to be involved in an in-house setting, finding what fields were of interest. And through conversations with mentors and further attempting to define the why, I was really surprised, happily so, that there were a lot of people in finance welcoming veterans with open arms. Like people are incredibly supportive in this field. And then so I kind of got that Venn diagram kind of zeroing in a bit. Then further to that, you find best in class talent, particularly in Longshore and some other hedge funds, one that I was really privileged to work with for a number of years. You see what right looks like from best in class in financial services space. And that's very inspiring. And if you enjoy being part of a very driven group of people, I mean, if you ever walk through, I'll just name names, Virtu Financial, a lot of veterans there, founded by an Army veteran, wonderful people. You can feel the culture there because they appreciate what veterans bring to the table. And so you start looking at organizations that have those openings and those opportunities, like JP Morgan, Goldman, a lot of organizations, a lot of the big banks have initiatives to hire veterans. Because they have already identified the skill sets, both in raw intellectual power and in soft skills that the veteran can bring to the table. So, after I mentioned defining the why and thinking financial services and discussing and doing due diligence on the field further, I was surprised, very pleasantly so, to see that there were a lot of resources available for learning, the material. I am very much an avid reader. I definitely concur, at least a book a month. I, just being a natural student, an academic, I enjoy learning, and Lord knows the SEC keeps things interesting. And in the space is ever changing, but it's ever changing because of incredibly driven people, very, very, very smart people. So I find that to be very stimulating, very engaging. And then I get to be in a role where now building something, but I'm also in my prior life advising people on options that are very creative, because you need to be able to think outside the box, and you're going to be asked to. You're going to be given facts that are seemingly very disparate and then have to distill out a solution or several solutions, which can be a lot of fun, be it in money laundering when you're trying to catch the bad guy, or you're trying to enable a portfolio manager or an investment manager to engage a certain client across the world. So it's a very interesting space, a lot of nuance, a lot of strong personalities, but I think that's a good thing. It keeps you on your toes, and you always will be learning something. So, you never stop learning. If you think you've learned everything, not the right field, definitely not the right field.
No, perfect. And something that you all sort of echoed there, guys, and throughout kind of the webinar is about those sort of transferable skills that veterans have. And touching back on Samuel's point actually earlier about what do I do to make myself more marketable? And Chris, you said it, you already are marketable. You have those skills. So just going back to that, how would you sort of say you got out of that mindset of thinking that you weren't sort of good enough for that kind of role? It's the imposter syndrome that we always hear about thrown around, not just in the military and financial services, but I guess across all walks of life. How did you guys sort of tackle that shift of seeing, like you said, calling in an airstrike in an active war zone to being in a sort of financial services, dealing with clients and people like that?
You drilled down on that. Just because I'm very passionate about veterans transitioning into the civilian world, because I know the skill sets are there. And people see, be it in a deployed environment or in the Crucible and a CONUS environment, a continental United States environment, when you're garrisoned at Fort Campbell, Fort Bragg, whatever, you can handle it, but you need to have the inner, the certitude that when you walk into that room to have that interview, you've totally got this. You've been in worse situations. Nobody's shooting at you in anger. You can handle it.
Agreed. Really, I think Derek gave some really good advice. Write all your skills down, minus the military acronyms, I guess, but whether it's process oriented, whether it's communication, or, quite frankly, being able to execute. That's a huge one. Executing upon mission success, right? It's all those things that are transferable into a civilian world. And to the point, have the confidence. I never felt like I couldn't do something. I always felt that I could. And the military gave me that confidence, because you will have more life experience than somebody, for the most part, you will have more life experience than somebody next to you in the same interview room, just because of the stuff you've experienced. Also, the diversity you've already experienced and how you have to work as a team. All those things are massive bonus and check marks in your favor going into the interview. Hands down. And I agree. You are highly marketable, and I think it's just asking people to review what you have to say and hone it. Especially, make sure it's digital nowadays too, and LinkedIn, and being able to communicate that in a digital format, not your traditional format. So,
yeah, I think in interviews too, like we talked a lot about being able to think outside the box. One thing I think that we bring to the table as veterans is we also know how to make decisions.
mm-hmm.
So in financial crimes, particularly, you're in this gray world. And a lot of people in business can sit on the fence and just ask someone else to decide one way or the other. And it's particularly in compliance, you got to make a choice, one side or the other side. That's what you're there to do. And so we think outside the box, and we make decisions with a worldview that is very unique, that considers many different factors, from geopolitical to financial to people factors, all in one pile. And another thing that we are very good at, regardless, is think about a situation that you've been in, that you've been uncomfortable, and you got through that uncomfortableness to a good outcome. That's the kind of thing that in an interview shows that you can get through whatever weird, crazy financial error or crime or whatever the problem may be. You'll get through it, and try and think about being uncomfortable every day and how much you can actually grow from that. And when you put those kind of thoughts together, you start thinking of situation, action, and outcome. So in an interview, this is the situation, this is the action I took, and here's the positive outcome that I have from it. And you'll find that you have an answer to a lot of the questions that someone would look at you and go, they've got skill sets. Maybe they have no background in mathematics, but honestly, like I said before, has nothing to do with financial services unless you're getting deep into some sort of bond, something or other. And it's very helpful.
No one should bonds. It's terrible.
Yeah. I don't want to talk about bonds.
No, perfect, guy. Well, we're coming close to the end of our sort of panel discussion here, gents. And what I just sort of wanted to put to each of you was obviously making that sort of switch, and just sort of some real, I guess, some personal sort of advice. Looking back to when you were sort of back in your shoes, either looking into making that sort of switch in civilian life, or in the middle of it, you sort of left active service. If you could sort of give one sort of solid piece of advice that either you yourself did, or going back you'd like to sort of do a bit differently, what would you sort of say to those sort of people in those shoes, for sort of making that switch, really? Anyone that wants to go first, I'll leave that to the floor.
That's a good question.
Well, I already said one, smile. I mean, whenever actually this comes from advice I was given while I was deployed, because a buddy of mine, he was like, Derek, you look kind of angry. You look kind of angry right now. I'm just not smiling. And I know myself, I've been videotaped at trial, so I know how I can come across. And so I need to, I'm on camera right now, so I'm, bizarre angles and all that. But, I'm a tall, fairly large human being. So, I need to smile, particularly when I'm dealing with a subordinate or a team member in communicating with somebody in the civilian world, command voice, all of that. And very early on, I think I was a little too much in my former mode. So jokes and the banter of the civilian office, which I found to be perhaps not necessarily efficiency contributing, I wouldn't necessarily engage with. Someone would come talk to me and be like, I've got work to do. Like, thank you so much. But you want to bring that EQ side, and you want to smile. And you definitely want to just be open to those conversations. That earlier, because that's a lesson I learned, and I have to remind myself, because I know how I can come across, and you just need to be self-aware. So if anything, I would just say self-awareness, and translating that self-awareness to the civilian world. That's probably my biggest practical takeaway.
EQ is a big one for sure.
Yeah.
For me, I think it would be, I should have asked more open-ended questions and taken a moment instead of, because again, you get really hyper-focused. The smile is a big thing too, but trying to understand other people's points of view on how they do things and why they do something a certain way versus just being rigid and this is how it should be done. You need to really expand your viewpoint a bit, is my personal contribution to this discussion. It really is not everybody, you can do things in multiple different ways and hit the same mark at the end of the day. And not everybody works in the same fashion as you. And I think that's the bigger thing that you need to have perspective on. That's my biggest thing in my career field. Some people do really well from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. They're doing things at crazy hours, and other people are very 9 to 5. And other people like me, I feel like I can put a lot on my shoulders, and I'm a workhorse, and I'll do things at all hours of the day and night. Just depends. I integrate things into my life. But I think you just need to be aware that not everybody is you. Not everybody, is the same, and you having that understanding of how and what their motivation is, I think, is very important in order to connect, because you really do need to connect with people and build that network so you really have a team, and personal friendships and how you grow your personal brand too, in and outside of your work. So those are my 2 things.
That was really good, James. That's like epic, right? You could probably just insert James again on my comment, right? It's very insightful to know what others around you are thinking like that. For me, I think the military makes you very confident, and particularly in the infantry, probably confident and cocky at the same time. So I was very
nodding down there.
Yeah, right. And I was very confident, and that confidence instilled in me the ability to learn and be successful in college. However, if you ask me fast forward, 10, 15 years, really, there's a different place to start that I wish I would have started at. It's more from humility, to be humble enough to learn. That's better than confidence to learn, right? You're able to ask questions without your pride getting into it. You're able to take feedback from a mentor or a manager without your pride being hurt, and learn from it. And I wish I would have started off more humble to learn. And then once you learn really well, then you could teach. And that's where we really reach a pinnacle, I think, of our careers, is when we're teaching other people how to do something that can benefit them. But to actually teach them, you have to be confident, because you have to know everything you need to know. So it really comes full circle that I just started at the confident end instead of the humility end, and somehow figured it out. And it was through, luck. I was actually part of teams that were very like-minded individuals like me, other veterans, other dudes that are pretty hardcore, and women as well, that just, they're part of hard compliance teams and AML teams. But when I moved into financial services technology, I had to change my tone. I had to change the way I thought about things, and it made me grow as a person that I wish I would have started with more humility rather than confidence.
No, excellent. Well, honestly, gents, thank you very much for all the insight on that. Like I said, we'll move on to a bit of a Q&A session now. And obviously we have our poll as well that we shared at the start. So of our viewers, actually, of the different states we're in, Florida, Texas, New York, and any other, Florida actually came up as the most sort of people on the panel that was interesting. But I know for a fact that in the United States, it's obviously Texas, which is the home of sort of the military and people leaving that. So go Longhorns, obviously. Have you guys sort of seen any kind of reason to why that is, or where to sort of look for those sort of financial services kind of industries in those certain states?
Those are big states. I mean, Florida's got a lot of migratory financial services now. A lot of places out of New York have got satellite offices or other big offices now opening in Florida. It's very tax advantaged. New York's just the hub, right? Texas has USAA, which I bet hires a ton of veterans. So that's probably my pick.
Texas also, that I mean, if you look at the numbers of community banks and credit unions, one of the largest states for that outside of California, Florida was very high before 2008, 2009. And then they had, obviously with the Great Recession, lots of failures on that side of the fence. But Texas also insurance companies out of there. And what you're starting to see is a mass migration into Austin and Houston. Like eBay, which, believe it or not, eBay has a financial services arm, and other, I would say challenger organizations moving into Texas based on the tax advantages of those states compared to Silicon Valley out in California.
Perfect. So then, obviously, thank you for all the sort of insight there, James. We'll move on to the to our Q&A now. Before we do, obviously, I'm just going to launch one more poll, sorry, to our viewers, and just ask, so in your opinion, what is the most valuable transferable skill within the financial services sector? Is it problem solving, teamwork, leadership, or any sort of other kind of skills that you'd like to sort of say out there? And then for our panelists, obviously, I'd like to say thank you for sharing your sort of knowledge on that, and for everyone watching. Just to echo what we said sort of throughout, if anyone would like to sort of speak to any of our panelists, myself over at EMC, Craig, who you see there, feel free to reach out. What we do is we share all profiles, contact information, everything you sort of need to get in touch. So no matter whether you're still in active service right now, making that transition in sort of civilian life and finding it sort of a bit of a struggle to come to terms with that, please do reach out, because the mission of EMC and then any panelists that we have on this is just to make life as easy as possible for that crazy transition and that sudden transition as well. So there is no sort of small question, no silly errand in that sense. We're always here to help. And then moving on to the Q&A session, guys. So the first one we have is actually from a fellow recruiter like myself, who works in the military space and often works with people making that transition. And they've asked that people coming out of the military, they often have a kind of warped or a different sort of perspective of what they're going to be stepping into. Either expectations a little bit too high of their sort of skill set and going in, or even putting themselves a little bit too low. How would you sort of say to someone what to sort of expect when making that shift, and what sort of how to sort of position themselves?
Have conversations as early as possible while still planning that transition. If you are already with DD 214 in hand or discharged, that could be a bit of an uphill battle. I think that it's best to, as I had many questions from folks who were looking at moving on from the military. I had one conversation with a colonel who had been in a very high position while deployed, and then various other successful high-level positions in the Pentagon. And he was being offered I would argue, a middle market job, which was not truly befitting his prior experience. But candidly, he was not aware, and that's why we're having a conversation as to what opportunities may be out there in the civilian world for someone of his resume. But he had spent his entire life in the Army. So when we were speaking, and this is through a conversation I had as a board member on a different organization, the idea is to connect him with executive coaches, recruiting services, people who have a broader perspective of the market, who can then help coach and advise as to what might be out there. So you refine the data set. I would not be worried with or engage in paralysis by analysis. Don't start thinking Murphy's Law and all the parade of horribles. Have conversations and get data from those conversations, and speak as early and as often as possible with people who are in the civilian world to refine that perspective.
Perfect, thanks, Derek. Anything to
Well
add, James?
No, I just think well said. I mean, the only thing I'd add is there's a ton of tools out there to research through. There's more things at your fingertips than ever before, from LinkedIn to, again, Glassdoors and other things that you can kind of find what to expect as you go in. But I'll just reiterate, finding people who are doing this every day and connecting, and maybe even mentorship out of that is invaluable, and that will set your expectations, especially around salary and all those other things that come along with it.
We lost James a bit.
A little bit.
Yeah, if you'd like to go, Chris.
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
I think
go for it,
just like Derek said.
Okay.
There we are. Anything to add on that, Chris?
No, you know what? I think James and Derek really covered it off. I think those are perfect answers.
No, perfect. And then so another question we have, guys, from Mark over on LinkedIn. So Mark's 10 years plus Army service. He's got a first degree in ICA and financial crime prevention, sitting his ACAMS and starting an LLM in October. He'll be leaving the military in 2 years to join a fintech industry. Any advice for him looking to sort of make that decision with a bit of a sort of plan in place?
I think you already got your plan. I think you're good. I mean, it sounds like everything has been thoughtful prior to. ACAMS is a great certification. I would even say outside the certification itself, it's the continuing education that's stellar from that organization. Association of Certified Fraud Examiners is also another great certification for the industry. And no, I mean, you'll find that you probably write a lot. Writing will be a big piece of the puzzle. When I first started, you're writing cases. It's a little bit different, and just be open to taking that critical feedback and becoming a better writer. I actually found myself getting a lot more into the writing aspect than I ever thought, writing thousands and thousands of pages. It took time and tweaks, but you'll find yourself doing that.
No, excellent. Well, if they have any more questions on that, I think we're going to wrap things up there, guys, and then obviously move on to a bit of a network session. So anyone watching either on LinkedIn Live, we'll post the link on our LinkedIn page, and please feel free to sort of come back, speak to the guys, obviously ask any questions you might have directly to them, for myself or Craig. And then obviously before I hand over to Craig, just wanted to thank you guys for taking the time to chat with me and share your sort of experience and knowledge there. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. And then for anyone watching, of course, whether sort of an organization or someone from that background, like I said at the start, if you'd like to get involved in any capacity, either as a panelist on our next sort of webinar, a mentor to those making that transition, an organization that's looking to partner with EMC to help sort of the veteran community find work, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to sort of facilitate that. So without further ado, thanks, guys, and I'll pass over to Craig.
Cheers, thanks very much, Harry, and obviously thank you to yourself, really great at hosting, and to Broadgate Search, and also thank you to Nova Group. Personal thanks to everyone who actually attended the event, and to our panelists as well, for giving up your time and joining us to explain this. What I would like to say to the audience is obviously please feel free to reach out to myself, and then I've just taken all the notes and writing down points here, because I've learned quite a lot as well. So then we can obviously help you advise of CV writing, and etc., and getting you prepared for those sort of interviews and going from there. And like the panelists have stated, I'm pretty sure they're more than happy to help you as well once you've added them on LinkedIn. So as further ado, I've got nothing more to add. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you.